Good afternoon. This is Brandon Roberts with the Citizen Support Team. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn. Be hosting this from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go ahead and give it a few minutes for some people to join in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so we have Jeremy and Morel on. How you guys doing? Do you guys have any questions?
I actually do. We recently upgraded from version 6 to, 6.10 to 6.19.
Mhm.
As a result of that, I had to redo some show hide rules. I don't remember if that was one of the tickets you helped me with or not, but I want to make sure that I only have to export the form to the higher environments. So within a specific form, I have a show high a visibility rule.
Mhm.
And I only changed that visibility rule. I did not change the underlying rule that says, if it's check ACH wire, that part stayed the same. I just had to change the description of how I was getting that information in. I want to make sure that all I need to move over is actually the form and not the whole flow.
Okay, yeah, you should only need, if you haven't changed the rule itself, you should only need to just import and export that form.
Okay, one more question. I can't remember where I had to add data. I had to create data elements because I had labels that were driving the show hides, and that's what stopped working in 6.19. So I think I did the create data in the form. Of course, I forgot to open it to check. So if I did it outside the form, I'd have to move that. But if I did it within the form.
Yeah, it should be self-contained within the form.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. That was my only question for today.
Okay, no problem. Does anyone, I see Mark and Jeremy are also here. Do you guys have any questions? If you do, feel free to just unmute yourself and answer the best I can. Okay, so we don't have any questions right now. So let's see. I think I'll go into a bit about recursion limits and flow behaviors. So every single flow by default has a recursion limit. Let me show my screen here. And you can find that by actually going into the flow. Actually, I have this one open and going into the properties of a flow here, and you can set the recursion limit here. So normally if you have a flow or a subflow that you're just running a whole bunch of executions on, typically they'll sort of hit their recursion limit and you'll hit an error message. It's pretty specific and pretty good verbiage, but if you do see that error message, it should highlight which flow is actually causing it. And here is where you can actually increase the recursion at. So it's a little tip. Sometimes I see customers hit that error. A lot of times they don't know where actually to configure that. And then next I want to discuss flow behaviors. So on the flow, if you can tell.
Sorry, I have a question about recursion.
Yep.
Since you're mentioning it. So that's flow overall, correct?
That's for the
So,
current flow.
all right, so we have a flow that where we already had to change that limit because we're cycling through, say, 25,000
Mhm.
Name and address records.
Mhm.
So we've set it to say 30,000, let's say.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding how it works at the flow versus the step level. So there's a potential that somebody's going to want us to run through it and say, if within field 3, the field only has 12 spaces in it, blank it out. And then repeat that for field 4, and then repeat it for field 5. Will the 25,000 still work, or do I need to change it to some obscene number that takes in each step?
It should be on the execution of the subflow. So if you're running that subflow within like the parent flow itself, I would probably, if you're worried, I would just increase it just in case, because it's not really harming anything if you increase the recursion limit on the flow itself, right?
Okay, so even if it's going to wind up being, if we do out the math, it's going to be like 100,000.
If you're expecting it to be 100,000, I would just increase that maybe to like maybe 110 or like 120 or something, just so you can give yourself a good like gap between recursion limit, so you don't hit that limit.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So where was I? So every flow has a flow behavior type. Default typing here is just flow here, but we have plenty of different types. As you can see, we have a lot of different types. So we have after check-in handler flows, after project creation handler flows, batch processing flows, before check-in handler flows. You get the idea. We have like a huge amount of flows that you can set up and run. For example, this after project creation or before check-in flows, you can have these flows built and trigger them to run after you've done a certain action. In this case, would like if you did a check-in to the repository, you can have a flow that is scheduled to run that, could make a call or update some sort of, backend system that you're using to sort of keep track of these sorts of things. Two in particular I want to highlight today are our login user flows. So we have two login flows, one for just a login flow that maybe you just want to add a user to a group once they log in or do some sort of calculation on a user that doesn't require any UI. You would use this login user flow. Now, if you want to have some sort of like like UI, or you want them to do some sort of extra login, or you want them to sort of put in some extra data that requires some user input, you would want to use a login user UI flow. Once they're actually configured, you'll want to go to your system, go to your settings, and then we'd go to the portal settings here. And there are two specific areas for that here. So we have login user flow, which would be for the one where you don't require like any user UI or user input, and a logger user UI flow. So, and it even highlights here, this is a flow that is used with no forms, and this is a flow that you can actually use forms in and, have user input on a login. Let's also see Joshua has also joined us. If you have any questions, feel free to just, you can put them in the chat, or you can just ask for permission to speak, and I can answer them to the best of my abilities. Trying to.
Brendan, we lost the Decision Studio panel. I only see the Lunch and Learn slide now.
Oops, sorry. flipped it back, meant to flip it back to, let me flip back here. Let's see. So has anyone used the global debugger at all? This is a new feature in version 7 that lets you debug like the portal itself. So if you go here in this little gear, that's what this option's for. Global debugger here, you can have that turned on. This is only really recommended for, testing in dev, because this is a huge resource, hog. It's going to take and just sort of, and you can you can control how long you want to preserve the data here. And this keeps track of any sort of flow that runs on the portal. So right now, the default inbox folder count flow just ran. Let's see here, if I go into flow one, actually, let me have this here. All right, debug this flow, just run it here. Will that show? Okay, nope, that only shows portal stuff. Okay, but it's a great way to see exactly what on your instance is sort of running and what's taking up time, and a great way to just sort of troubleshoot other slowdown issues. I'll go and turn this off because I don't want this to cause too much slowdown on my machine. We also have this link here for our documentation. It takes you right to our V7 docs, so you can always have a quick way to get to our documentation. And this is our support chat. This is a new feature in version 7. We're still working on getting more support agents to be able to answer here, but the idea here is you can always just hit this, and depending on when you do actually start, keep in mind we're on the Eastern time. So I believe it's between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern, you should normally get an answer pretty quickly. Again, we're still working on getting more support agents to get some better response times out here, but this is also a good tool in case you have like a really small question, like maybe Amarel had about her form import export question. Those sort of questions are always good to just sort of ask here and get some answers from our support team directly. And if they end up, and it could be, and it's not limited to that, any other questions you can ask here. If it is like a bigger support question that, require us to like draw up some like examples or do some testing our end, our team will then get a support ticket submitted for you to sort of better track that. Let's see. We also didn't have any pre-submitted questions today, so this might be a shorter lunch and learn than normal. You can normally, when we send out the lunch and learns, there's a link to the pre-submitted questions form, right?
There should be, yes.
Okay, just want to confirm that. So yeah, there should be a link. If you ever have questions that you want to ask prior to joining, you can always just use that link to submit them, and then we should have an answer ready for you. Since we got some time, I'll also go into some more troubleshooting, some logging categories. So if you go to System Administration, System Tools, and Logging, here you'll get a list of, most people are used to, you get a list of the logs here. What you can also do here is go to Edit, is it Edit Log Settings, or is it I believe it's this here. This is new, so we can then specify what sort of logs you want to see. So we have verbose, debug, information, warning, error, and fatal logs. So lots of time, well, not lots of times, but there are times where standard logging isn't enough for troubleshooting the process. Sometimes the logs are hidden, not in a warning or an information or error. Sometimes you'll want to use the debugging, and debugging tracks pretty much everything that goes on in the background. And let me just refresh this. You can see my logs just sort of ballooned as soon as I did debug level logging. So it's a tip here that we use to support where we're trying to troubleshoot something and we just can't figure out, or we just don't see the logging on the standard warning error fatal. That's when we kick on the debug level logging. That gives us pretty much information into anything that's running at the time. Yeah, but it is a double-edged sword, right? So you can get those really in-depth nitty-gritty logs, but it causes it to sort of balloon and you got to turn it off really quick or your logs are just going to get flooded with a whole bunch of noise here. That's another tip we use, or that's another tool we use in support to sort of better troubleshoot and figure out what's going on in customers' processes or in problems with the product itself. So we're getting short on time here. Has anyone have any questions or they need assistance? All right. Is anyone running into sort of any issues with decisions? Any projects they like to share?
How's it going, Brandon? No, I'm just a fly on the wall. Just here to absorb knowledge. That's all.
Okay. Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. How long you been working with decisions?
So since December 9th, so I just got out of my training not too long ago.
Okay. So let's see. Welcome aboard. Welcome to the family. So there is, I think, I don't know if anyone here was on the last one. Let's see. I can always do another walkthrough of system tools here real quick. So we have a couple of tools that we use to sort of keep track and see, sort of troubleshoot errors when working and developing decisions. I already showed off the logging tool. It's two also great with tools. The profiler itself actually shows, similar to the general debugger, it shows, exactly what's running on the instance at the time. And
Yeah, I
normally,
think I took a look at that probably like once, but that's actually pretty neat.
yep, it's a great tool using downloading in the text view. You can see exactly like what's running, and it's a good way of seeing, what's taking forever. Also got event viewer and flow management, which are really good to sort of see other things that are running. So we have like the upgrade history. So if you're ever curious about like what versions this, database has been on, you can always go here and it'll exactly give you when it was upgraded, as well as like what version it was on. Also, you get the boot history here. So you can always just check to see when the instance was started or when it went down. So maybe somehow something ran under, like the server went down overnight, no one even realized that. You can always just come here and verify if something, went wrong or if it did shut down. Normally when you do a restart, you'll get like a restart reason. And that's changed in 7 now because it's all done through the service. You can still keep track of the boot history here. We've got the scheduled job log tool that just sort of keeps track of like pending scheduled jobs that are supposed to run and scheduled jobs that have ran. We've got the thread jobs, which is really good about keeping track. Keeping track of what jobs are running on a thread. And we've got a lot more. We've got the account login history, code buckets, message queues, client events. Data structure status is really good. This lets us see if any data structures on the environment are in a bad state or invalid. Combined with the code compile results report, this actually lets you know if there's a code compile, what actually failed in the compile, and it actually gives you, what error it failed on. These are really good tools in sort of figuring out if there's an issue with the data structure. If a data structure in the flow is having problems, you can always come here and see, which is having trouble. Also have an active user report. So this, lets you know how many active users are actually working on the instance at one time. Got some other, these are actually new. Latest DB queries actually show what have been ran on the instance, and the heaviest DB queries. These are actually pretty new. I'm not too sure on these. So if anyone has questions about these, we can always make sure we get an answer out to you guys. These are some of the newer queries that we have on the report.
I noticed that there was a orphan entities option there. That just shows the entities that have been like orphaned. When the
Yep.
parents has been deleted, it shows
Right.
those. Okay.
Right, pretty much. Those are just, those are just out in the open. Let's see. And there is the flow management tool. This has the flow management tool that just sort of keeps track of what's running, as well as running flows, currently running flows. Integration activities are like, when you send an email out, this normally keeps track of if an email has failed, you can always come here and check to see if it's failed or not. We've got stored workflows or flows that, if you're running something or a flow has been running and the server's restarted or something goes down, these get stored here and get ran again. We've got the flow step timing. Is it the flow step timing? No, that's not the one. This flow structure has a list of every step that's ran in every single flow. So it's a good way of sort of seeing what steps are being used here, or if you're having trouble and there's like a log that's saying this step is failing and you don't know where that step is, this is a good place to sort of find that step and track down what flow it's running in and, get a better understanding where it's happening with that. Here. Let's see. Anything here? Oh, system validation report. So this lets you know of any sort of errors that are like in your flows or in like your data structures, for example. And these normally require some sort of review, right? Like you'll on imports, sometimes you'll get a lot of import issues and you can do this clear all import issues. Also just run a system validation to make sure this is always up to date. They'll go through and just check for any errors. And these errors can be, it really just depends. Again, this will need to be reviewed, but any sort of like warning validation here will be thrown because will show up here. And that could be, in this case, this rule is just missing on my environment, or it can be something like I just bypass this step here and just connect to here. If this error wasn't here, this would still show up because this error is causing a validation. So it's a good tool to just sort of see what's, if there are any problems or if there are any issues with flows. But again, it will require some further review from the team just to see exactly why it's erroring out there. Let's see. All righty. Does anyone else have any questions? If not, we're nearing the end time here, cutoff time. Yeah, just ignore that error that popped up on my screen. I'll have to look at that off call. But I'll go ahead and end our session for today. I want to thank everyone for joining, and I hope you guys have a great day and a great weekend. And make sure to come in next week. We have these every day, Monday through Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And you won't just hear from me, you'll hear from a lot of different people, a lot of people from our professional service team. Will Pedersen, our Vice President of Customer Success, who's been with the product for almost, I think Will's been here for almost 6-7 years. And he's probably one of the most knowledgeable people on the platform. So if any questions, Will doesn't know it, it's a tough problem that no one probably, it's going to take a lot to figure out. But I digress. You guys have a great rest of your day and a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.